Now I think we have this car lowered to where my son will be happy with it now. The threaded rod system just didn't work out. I don't believe it would work out for anybody. Avis adjusters, that was a big mistake. That gave us nothing but trouble. Use Bug Pack, use something else, anything else, but don't use Avis. The Avis stud stripped out almost immediately, and we had to make a spacer above and below the stud to keep it in place. Now that we have the correct shock on this car and we have these springs adjusted, it rides just great. Just be sure to use a good adjuster like Bug Pack. Don't use Avis. You may have to cut away a little bit of your trailing arms on the rear. We had to. We used masking tape over the trailing arms to be able to tell where it was hitting so we'd know where to cut away. We used the original piece we'd cut out of these tubes where the grub screw goes, but in order to use it again you'll have to heat it and you'll have to press the piece you see on the left out, and it's quite a job. It'll take a good press and a good torch. We used the original grub hole screw as a starting point. You can see where we've got it marked here between the two holes to cut out. Also, that Avis adjuster will have to be ground down a little bit on the outside diameter to get it to go into the tube. That's another thing we didn't like. No instructions at all with this Avis adjuster. You can see here where I've heated it cherry red and used my press to press that original piece you see on the left out. Do just one adjuster at a time so you don't lose the alignment of the tube, and make sure to clean that real good so your weld will be good. Here I've tack welded the adjuster ramp onto the tube. Now both adjusters are welded onto the tubes. Since no instructions came with these adjusters, there's a lot of guesswork involved, so we just spot welded these adjusters in place and put the front end back in and drove it to make sure everything was okay, so we wouldn't have to do this all over again. We used the original spring retainer to tap back and forth on this spring pack to clean the rust off, especially the lower tube. That's the one that catches the most water. The adjustment stud that sticks out is of course at a 90-degree angle to the tube, and we have it pointed down just a little bit. I can't tell you how many degrees, but just barely pointed down. We found this to be a good starting point, and of course raising it would be up from there. It worked out real good. Just tap that original spring retainer back and forth on that spring pack, and that'll clean the rust off for you, and then when you slide it in the tube it'll go in a whole lot easier. Also grease the bearings where your trailing arms are before you put your trailing arms in. We made both new studs a lot higher quality bolt material than what Avis had furnished. What they furnished just stripped right out. So bear that in mind. Luckily the threads in the spring retainer plate did not strip out. Since we narrowed this front end 4 inches, we had a little bit of trouble with the shock towers hitting against the fender apron, so I heated it with my torch and dimpled it in just a little bit for clearance so it wouldn't make a noise. I knew that aluminum plate was junk and it was going to give trouble, so I took a flat washer and bent the edges down on both sides to give that aluminum plate a little bit more support, hoping that it would help support it. This is the original camber adjusting nut in the top trailing arm. Here's another view of the original. Here's a carbide burr that I used to make a dimple for that grub screw in the end of the spring pack that we had to cut off to shorten. That is tempered steel, that spring pack is, and it'll take a high quality drill bit to drill the dimple in. So I just went ahead and used this burr. I had one the right size. Okay, now we got the front end back together and ready to put it in for a trial run to make sure it's okay before we weld it solid. I would highly recommend doing that. All worked out just fine, so we welded it solid. The shock we used was Monroe 5752, and it was about 2 inches shorter than the shocks we tried to use that wouldn't work. Very short shock. You may have to put just a little bit of weight on the car to get it to hook up. Our shocks were bottoming out, so we had to use this 5752. That worked just fine. I'll weld a patch back over this trailing arm where we sliced it out for clearance. Here's another view of that camber adjuster that we used in the upper ball joint. It helped some, but still didn't give us enough adjustment, but it's going to work out okay. I wouldn't recommend anything I wouldn't use, and I wouldn't tell a lie in my videos like so many people do. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the web. Don't believe all this stuff. Don't believe what they say about Avis adjusters. Do your research. They're junk. Well, I hope this video has helped you some. Watch for my upcoming video, Complete Restoration of a 1965 Beetle. I'll have hundreds of photos of that car and hundreds of hours in the restoration, so be sure and watch for that. Lots of information about a lot of things, engine, transaxle, everything. Thanks for watching. See ya.